everybody, welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 73, coming to you Monday morning in Los Angeles, Hollywood to be more specific. I've been out here for a few days. I had a really fun event last night that I was a part of that I'm going to tell you about in a minute, but I just want to welcome you to the podcast. I know you're hearing this a little later. I had to record on West Coast time, so it'll be out at around 1 p.m. on Monday when you're getting this. And I came out here to do a benefit for Adam Schiff, the wonderful chair of the Intelligence Committee, the House Select Committee member who's helping bringing us these amazing hearings. He had a benefit that he does annually at the Improv in Los Angeles with a bunch of comedians. So I was invited to be a part of it, and I did not hesitate. And I got on a plane. I came out here and quarantined for a couple days. Not that I'm positive or anything, just played it safe in the hotel room until it was time for the gig. Went and did the gig. Dana Carvey was the first comedian up. He followed Adam Schiff, who did a great set. Jeff Ross hosted. Margaret Cho performed. Jenna Friedman performed. Noel Casler performed. Lisa Ann Walter performed. Christina Alonso performed, and I think that's about it, but that's a pretty good lineup, and it was a wonderful night, one of the best sets of my life, just because it felt so good to be there and see some West Coast people, and there was some podcast fans in the audience, and they made my night, because Jeff introduced me and said he's the host of the Noel Casler podcast, and a couple people clapped, and it was the perfect send-up to walk on stage and feel that love, and to be in a crowd of like-minded, compassionate, empathetic souls that have the right idea about politics and the right kind of spirit to change things, because that's what we need to do. And that's what my set is about, and my comedy and my podcast, as you well know. And it always feels good to sort of get together, because I think that recharges people, that soul-to-soul energy, looking somebody in the eye who feels the same way you do about the direction of this country and what matters and what doesn't. It's a good feeling. It's a healing thing. We need more of that. And we need to counter what's going on the right. Because they had two rallies this weekend. They had one in Arizona, called Save America PAC or something that Trump spoke at, and Kerry Lake and all these other whack jobs on Friday. And then on Saturday, they had this horrible Tea PAC or whatever it's called in Florida, Turning Point USA, it's called, I believe. Trump spoke, Matt Gaetz spoke, said that only, ugly women are the ones that want abortions, like insane stuff, like the most misogynistic, hate-filled bile. DeSantis had literal Nazis outside of his rally where he was speaking to young people. So they're reaching out and trying to indoctrinate young people, children, with hate, with misogyny, with intolerance. Marjorie Taylor Greene said it's a Christian nationalist nation. They're building a Nazi party right before our eyes, right? It's Nazism 2.0. And the fact that somebody could stand on the street in Florida with a huge Nazi sign and a big, not sign, flag, and an SS flag, and it's perfectly legal, and the governor of the state doesn't denounce it, and all the wealthy, prominent people in that state don't really object to it or fight back about it, is very scary and very disheartening, because he's branding the fascism that he's, implementing in Florida across the country. He's running commercials in Texas. There's a slogan like "Make America Florida," right? He calls it the Freedom State, or whatever the hell that tagline is. And that's scary, because it's going to have appeal. He's going to take the sort of charisma that Trump had. And I know that's hard for people to swallow, and I don't mean it in the traditional sense, but he has appeal to his people. These rallies, they had pyro pots, they're called, like big fire displays and smoke machines and big video screens, and they announce them like it's WrestleMania. And that produces adrenaline in people, especially in a crowd, because they're all in the same room and they feed off each other's energy, just like you do in a comedy show. In a positive way, right? When people are all laughing together, it feels good. It's communal. You get caught up in it. That same sort of dynamic that works for humans in crowds can work in the bad way, can work in a negative way. And the more evil and charismatic leaders throughout history knew that. Mussolini knew that. Hitler knew that, and there's certain elements that need to get combined in that. You have to deprive them from other things to make them more susceptible to it. And that's what the Republicans are doing. Their messaging is on brand 24 hours a day. Liberals are bad. Democrats are socialists. They're destroying your country. And they're going for it all the time. And they have hundreds of henchmen. They have Ronnie Jackson and all these idiots and Matt Gaetz and MTG. So they're giving that branding to these people who aren't getting really something else. It's easy to say that some of these folks are kind of a lost cause, but the young people aren't. It's very scary that Ron DeSantis and Trump are speaking to crowds specifically aimed at young people. That's not by accident. Okay, that's on purpose. That's the indoctrination, that the right accuses the left of. DeSantis, as I said last week, is changing the curriculum in schools because he knows. He knows if he breeds a couple generations of people, ensconced and immersed in this kind of ignorance, it's going to be smooth sailing because they won't have the equipment to challenge him, right? They won't have the mental faculties to understand they've been conned. That's why cults are so hard to get out of, right? Because they deprive people of things that, from sleep, protein, you name it. There's all kinds of like little tricks that cult leaders use. They cut you off from the outside world and they only feed you their message and their dogma. And that's being branded on a national level right now. That is full force what the right is doing. They're having rallies every weekend. That's why I started the show with this. They did 2 of them. As I said, that's insane. What did the Democrats do? What are we doing on a big level? Nothing. In that respect, and it occurred to me last night when we did this comedy show, how many people showed up. It was a full house. They love Adam Schiff, Congressman Schiff. Who wouldn't? He's a wonderful leader. He's the kind of leader we need. He's empathetic. He's smart. He's fierce. He's not afraid to express his opinion. He's not afraid to sort of call out the DOJ, say what's going on here. You guys shouldn't really be behind us. Like he calls it like he sees it because he understands the gravity of the situation. And he's also a very kind, very present, very empathetic dude, who got up and gave a hug to every comedian when they came off stage, which felt wonderful and was real class act. And he's actually very, very funny. And he had a very great set. And Dana Carvey kept turning around to me during Schiff's set and was like, "Oh my God, he's doing act out. Oh my God, he's got props." Like he put some work into this, and it was entertaining. So I'm digressing there, but when I was in that room and feeling that feeling, I was thinking about, the thousands of people at these Trump rallies and at these right-wing rallies, and what effect it's having on them, and how are we going to counter that? They're having Viktor Orban speak at CPAC next week. Trump's going to D.C. to speak at one of these things this week. It's his first time back in Washington since January 6th, 2021. So they're on the march. And I think we need to develop a more effective way to counter it. I think we need the Democratic equivalent of these kind of rallies. We need an AOC. We need a Beto on that stage. We need Adam Schiff. We need to hear from the people that are leading us. And we need to do it in a way that will attract young people and people into the fold. Because anecdotally, when I travel around, like people don't know what's going on. I talk to waitresses and waiters and, servers and people in hotels and stuff. And a lot of them, I'll mention something politically and they don't know who it is. I said, I'm here to do something for Adam Schiff. I had 2 people who live in LA not know who Adam Schiff is. He's the congressman from Burbank who's a national figure in politics and has been for 5 years, since the Trump era, and he became sort of public enemy number 1. So that means there's not something that's attracting them to pay attention to this, and it's easy to write that off and say, well, they should be reading papers or they don't have time to do that because they have jobs and a gig economy. I get that, man. Because everyone's hopping in their Uber and working a shift after they did a shift in a restaurant or whatever it is. It's hard to survive, but we have to figure out some way to sort of bring us together and reaffirm the challenges ahead and inspire people, like a Woodstock or something, a defining sort of series of events that can really plainly point out where we're at right now, where we need to go, and what we face. And that's why I talk about that, in my set. Those of you guys who've seen my show, I talk about how inspired I was from Barack Obama's 2 inaugurations, and most specifically this concert we did for HBO on the Mall the Sunday before. And we had all these great performers there, Stevie Wonder and Garth Brooks and Bruce Springsteen and Beyonce, and it just went on. U2, it went on and on. But the point, James Taylor, the point wasn't the performers. The point was the audience. Because something happens when people come together that have a lot of love in their hearts, that have a lot of open positivity, that have a desire for equality. It takes on a life of its own. It's like a Dead show or something. There's a symbiotic relationship at the best of performance that goes from the audience to the band or performer back to the audience. And very quickly, it becomes something bigger than yourself. And you can feel it. It's a palpable energy. And that energy will inspire you. It's portable. It's a movable feast. You can put it inside, carry it in your heart, and spread it to others from there. You bring it back home and you share it with your family. Because it's a light. It's a flame. It's inspiration. It may seem ethereal, but it's more important than you think. And they're doing it in a negative way. They're spreading hate because they see the value in that, and they see the value in the production element, the WWD stuff, WWE stuff, the making it fun, the making it like a rock concert. They had Ted Cruz's name on a big video screen. Please welcome Ted Cruz. And people are clapping. That's insane. Who's clapping for Ted Cruz? His wife hates him. His children hate him. He's universally reviled. And they're able to present him on a stage in a way that people clap as a rock star. They have Lauren Boebert doing a hateful, basically stand-up set. There's nothing. They have no shame, and there's nothing beyond, like, there's nothing like off limits for them. They'll say anything on stage. That's why I referred to the Matt Gaetz comment. Something like that would have never, ever been said in politics just 15 years ago. If a congressman said something like this in this political climate, especially after Roe v. Wade was rescinded, he would have been done. And you're talking about a congressman who's been under investigation for a year and a half for having sex with teenage girls that he was paying with drugs and Venmo cash. That's crazy. And there's also a reason why he hasn't been indicted yet. And everyone's like the same DOJ. Oh, take your time. They're building a case. How much time do you need? Because you're letting him walk free and he's pissing people off and being a chaos agent for the right and getting these clips in there. And you now have a few more months. Come November, they retake the House. It's game over. You're not going to be able to hold Matt Gaetz accountable, because they'll shut down the investigative, January 6th committee, right? And he'll have powerful congressmen that like the work he's doing, which is trolling and stuff. And I guarantee you DeSantis is already sticking his fingers in whatever investigation is going on down there. And I know you have the DOJ stands that don't want to hear that, but come on, dude. If he wasn't a wealthy white kid whose dad wasn't at one time, president of the Florida Senate, or Speaker of the Senate, whatever the nomenclature is, his dad was a very powerful state senator. He's got his, hooks in Florida politics. So there's a reason he hasn't been indicted, and hopefully he will. But it goes to the earlier point I'm always trying to make about time is not on our side. These are not normal times. You don't just let these guys walk free and build a solid case, because sooner or later they'll slip the noose. That's what happened with Alvin Bragg in New York. He shut down the case that 2 awesome prosecutors had spent a year and a half working on. Dudes from Paul Weiss that were working pro bono, legal eagle, bad dudes who were ready to rock and roll on Trump and had a case. Had Alan Weisselberg, who would never have flipped, by the way. But, they had enough evidence, and these guys felt like they had enough evidence. And Alvin Bragg came in and said, no, I don't think there's enough evidence. Well, I think he thought it wouldn't be politically expedient. If it didn't work, his career was over. And that's what happens. You give people time, they'll find a way to find out what motivates somebody in power and then put the right amount of pressure on them to do what you want them to do. And Trump is a master of that. He's a master at manipulating the system. The DOJ first opened a case into Trump in 1973 when he and his father discriminated against African American folks in housing, right? And they wouldn't rent to black families, right? So the DOJ brought him up on discrimination charges, right? And what did Trump do? He turned around and sued the DOJ. He got aggressive with it, right? Because that's what he does. That's what he learned from Roy Cohn. People learn that kind of stuff, and they say, hey, you know what? It's a pain in the ass to go after this guy. He's going to make all kinds of noise. He's going to push back. It's going to be ugly. Let's just let him slide. And that set the precedent for Trump. That's why he got away with all that stuff in New York for so long. And then you had other corrupt politicians that enabled it. Rudy Giuliani, half the building commissioners and stuff that he would have up to his little penthouse parties at the plaza when he owned Trump Model Management and made all these European teenage girls come and basically service Trump's clients. And then Trump would get compromise on them and use it against them. So he would get things done. Building permits, it's the way it works. And sort of as dumb as he is, he's a master of the corrupt world. He was brought up in that. I mean, think about that case I just said, the DOJ suing him for discrimination in housing. The apartment buildings that Trump's father built, he did it with FHA no-interest loans, right? Those were part of the New Deal. They were designed to help build housing for returning troops coming from World War II, so they'd have a place to live and, start a family. So they gave these loans out to builders. Trump's father took advantage of that, built all these buildings, and then used it to launder money for the 5 families, for Casa Nostra, right? Most specifically, the Genovese crime family. That's what Trump's dad was. He was a middleman, money launderer for the Genovese crime family. That's why when Trump started to build his towers in New York, and wanted to, his father said, that's not our territory. That's Gambino's thing. And Trump was the young upstart who wanted to go in business with the Gambinos, and he did. Paul Castellano, Fat Tony Salerno, later John Gotti, when John Gotti whacked Castellano, right? So Trump is in that world, and I point that out because the irony of the DOJ having to sue a guy for discrimination that got money from our government to do the right thing, didn't do the right thing, and then the son of that man becoming president of the United States, being the worst president, not just in the history of the United States. You could make a good case that he was the worst leader in the history of the world outside of, Hitler, who was his mentor, essentially, intellectually, right? Because he had a copy of Mein Kampf, and Hitler's speeches at his bedside table, as Ivana pointed out, who happened to die, 2 weeks ago, the day before he had to be deposed along with his children in New York in a state attorney general case involving his businesses. His wife mysteriously falls down the stairs, dies of a torso injury. Instead of the 2 weeks it normally takes for a medical examiner, in 2 or 3 days she gets cleared, no toxicology report, and then he buries her on his private golf course so she could never be exhumed. If there's ever a case brought against it, or if somebody wants to figure out more about it, you can't. And a week later, days after the funeral, right? The funeral was just this week. Days after, you have her son, Don Jr., coked out of his mind, coked to the gills, universally commented on Twitter, like, how much cocaine is this guy on, right? I worked in the music business, I've been around cocaine. Like, that dude was gacked out of his mind. He was on some Heisenberg blue meth or something, right? Right there on the stage. A week after his mom died, a couple days after his funeral. My grandmother passed away in the spring, And I still am trying to process the grief. And she was in her 90s and died of natural causes. So my point is, these guys are all sort of involved in the grift and the cover up of what they're trying to do. And you can't sleep on that. He's going back to DC this week to have a rally. He's getting closer and closer to sort of feeling emboldened, right? He's going to go on the aggression again against like the January 6th committee, right? I mean, he's frustrated. He knows they have him dead to rights, but he knows he has things on his side. He's got the Secret Service on his side, who now lawyered up. Tony Ornato and Bobby Engel lawyered up. They don't want to talk to the January 6th committee. They don't want to tell the truth, which is shameful. I went to high school with Bobby Engel. He's a Marine after high school and, cop type, as I said last week. He was the dude Trump was going to pick because he's good at finding the guys that are going to be loyal to him. And it's usually these, Italian, Irish, New York area kind of cop-like guys. Trump has a sixth sense for finding those guys, getting them to do their bidding. And my guess is Tony Ornato was full on, drank all the Kool-Aid. That's why he became a White House director for Trump. He actually left the Secret Service for a time and was just like a staffer for Trump in the White House, doing his special bidding, right? The Bobby Engel guy was his body man. That was the dude with him walking in Lafayette Park when they're tear gassing protesters and stuff. So he did a lot of shameful stuff for the president, and he's probably pretty morally convicted about it, because I don't think he started out as a bad guy, but he got in so deep that now he's screwed. Now he's got to lawyer up, and there's a reason that dude was out of there when Trump left. He went down to Tampa and got into the counterfeit side of the Secret Service stuff, So all those guys got placed, and Trump hoped nobody would ever hear from him again, right? And then, Casey Hutchinson spilled the beans, which they weren't counting on, right? So it's a problem for Trump, but what does he do? They reach out. Hey, we heard you're going to testify tomorrow. Just want you to know Trump's going to be listening. So do the right thing, capiche? That's mob tactics, right? And these people fear Trump more than they fear the Justice Department, more than they fear the January 6th committee, which is a wonderful tool for investigating things, but they don't have any real legal authority to do much. They can refer to the Justice Department, and, in Bannon's case, thankfully he was convicted. But what did even Bannon do? He was back on his podcast an hour later, using it for an opportunity to spread his message. The kind of like judo that the right has developed to flip everything into their branding and their promotion is what we need to fear. And I don't mean fear in a powerless way, but become aware of and counterbalance with positivity, because the corruption is so endemic at this point. These guys are so morally bereft of any kind of, ethics. There's nothing beneath a Kevin McCarthy. A man has never been more degraded than that guy is. Just a coward in every sense of the word. A Mark Meadows. Trump melts the souls of these men who didn't have much metal to begin with. These weren't like high achieving, intelligent people. These were mediocre white men who found their place in a position of power because some other rich businessman gave them some money and knew they'd be a corrupt enough politician to do them some favors, right? So they got into office. That's the traditional route of American politics, right? That's why it's always an old white guy, right? Because that white guy plays golf with a rich guy in his town in North Carolina, and that guy's like, I'm going to support you, but you're going to let me build this factory, or whatever it is. That's how politics has always worked, the Boss Tweed model, right? And Trump knows all that stuff. The GOP knows all that stuff. And the scariest thing is having somebody who isn't as out of control as Trump in a position of power, right? Now Trump's in this horse race with DeSantis. DeSantis has him beat. He knows it. Trump knows it, right? Trump's not going to go away. He's going to grift as much as he can, up until the election, and then he's going to figure out what kind of deal he needs to cut with DeSantis. It could be, I support you for president, you pardon me, right? You pardon my kids. There'll be some sort of quid pro quo that if they grab power, Trump will be free and continue to prosper. And all these people on the sidelines that know about it will let it happen. And the GOP will cheer it on. And the more Americans that they can brainwash in the meantime through these WWE events, the more of them they get, the easier it will be for them to hold on to power. So they're setting the stage to make a country that you don't recognize anymore. And we've never in my lifetime been in more dire straits or had more issues. And one of the great sins of this time and what they're doing is what they're taking away, in terms of attention and focus onto the things we really need to focus on, right? Trump was doing his climate change as a hoax thing at the rally to young people. He was telling young people that climate change is BS. What kind of message is that to send while Europe's on fire this week? While America has, wildfires in Yosemite, right? And droughts, and it's 110 degrees in Texas, and their corrupt governor can't even keep the power on because he's beholden by energy companies that don't want to be regulated, so they're not part of the national grid, right? And here you got this idiot standing there in a diaper who lives on a private golf course, that he owns several of, telling them that climate change is a hoax. And you'll have a generation of ignorant people believing that, standing in the way of progress. And he's stealing the time we need to be focusing on that. We're in like DEFCON 4 in dealing with this stuff. It's here now. It's horrific, It's so hot on the East Coast. You're listening to this now. I'm on the West Coast. It's hot too, but the East Coast, it's not supposed to always be 95 degrees. We used to have a summer that was enjoyable. Now it's a terrifying situation. It's not supposed to be 105 degrees in London as it was last week, right? But instead of dealing with that stuff, we're dealing with the sideshow, freakish nature of what the GOP is trying to accomplish. And they're doing it. And we're not countering it in the way we need to, and this is not a indictment of anybody. It's just saying we haven't beaten them yet, and we need to. We need to have more people realizing the biggest threat you face is climate change, besides the political authoritarianism. And all these social issues, they're going to flip just like judo, as I always say, because they're very adept at using the sort of energy and momentum against the Democrats. It's like they accuse us of what they're really doing. Like Biden's a pedophile. No, he's not, but Trump actually was. Trump actually was indicted in a court document for raping a 13-year-old, two of them, in Jeffrey Epstein's house. And that was common practice for Trump. Anybody who knows him, he was into young girls that looked like his daughter. The guy's a sick man. If he wasn't wealthy, he would have been in prison a long time ago. But he's wealthy. But they use it against Biden, who's just like this nice grandfather who nobody would ever think that. But the propaganda works, And that's scary because the social issues we're facing in this country are unlike anything I've seen. We're all used to, what's happening in New York with unhoused people. In LA, it's shocking that they've always had a problem here with with providing affordable housing to the amount of people that need it, and the amount of addiction and social services and mental illness and kind of, they've been nationally known for the skid row they have here. And I've been aware of that for a long time, but now it's everywhere. This is my first trip to LA since probably 2015, and it's shocking. The drive from the airport to Hollywood, it was just like human beings lying on the side of freeways. You didn't even know if they were alive or dead. These encampments everywhere. Just, human suffering everywhere. A guy lying on the street, writhing, in pain, like mentally ill, disturbed, right outside a restaurant. And you're supposed to sort of just step over it and go about your life. That's dehumanizing. We can't do that. And there's a lot of good people out there trying to make a difference and doing outreach and stuff. But the problem has gotten so bad, it can't be solved by nonprofits, and church groups and whatever. This needs a bureaucracy. This needs the full weight of the American government addressing this. This needs funding, right? Imagine if we didn't fight a war in Afghanistan that basically only benefited the oil companies because we used so much energy and fuel in prosecuting a war that accomplished nothing. Imagine if we didn't do that for 20 years and we tackled homelessness in America, and mental illness and social services. But we didn't, and part of the reason we didn't is because the Republicans didn't want us to. And Democrats know those bills will never get passed, especially when you have Joe Manchins and Kristen Sinemas and these kind of spoilers, that have already infiltrated the Democratic Party. And the reason the GOP doesn't want to do that, besides the obvious fact that they're greedy and don't have any empathy, is they know they can use those problems against the Democrats in election years. And that's what they do. You always hear them talking about San Francisco and Seattle, and how the streets are lawless and, filled with immigrants and unhoused people and danger, so they want to paint the picture as ugly as possible. And it's an ugly picture. It's not right that many people have to live that way. It would never happen in a Scandinavian country. It just would not. You wouldn't see that in Europe. You know what I mean? Because people would be like, that ain't right. And the wealthy people would be like, I can't sleep at night knowing that people are sleeping on the streets. Get them off the streets. I don't want to look at that when I go out to dinner. And that doesn't mean get them out of the streets in a bad way. It means let's do something about it. I'm paying taxes. Use them. I want my taxes to go for giving homes, food, medical services, education, whatever people need in a social service sense. That's what we should be spending our money on. That's what matters. That is the most important resource we have in this country, is each other. Whether you want to hear that or not, we're all in this together. Human beings, animals, the environment, plants, trees, birds, everything that's living with eyes, it is your friend, whether it seems that way or not. That's what you're here to love and protect, not the interests of some businessman, and not the political football of blaming these systematic problems on the Democrats because they happen to occur most in the big cities and then they can say it's a Democrat-run state. It's the Democrats' fault, which is completely BS, right? But it's effective because it scares the people in the Midwest, the mostly white people that fall for this stuff. They see these images and they're horrible, and then they take a vacation to Hollywood because they want to go, to Universal Studios or something. And then they see it with their own eyes, and they already have that built-in sort of prejudice and fear of it. And then that mantra of, oh, this is the Democrats' fault. This is what's going to happen in Indiana, if we don't vote for Trump or DeSantis or something, right? So in the big picture sense, in the macro sense, all of these disasters feed the messaging of the GOP, and they hamper our ability to counter them. And that's why I was saying we need to start having our own kind of rallies where we address these issues, where we have people come out and speak about solutions to homelessness, and how we can build stronger, safer communities, how we can clean up our environment, how we can have urban renewal projects, and gardens, and things to help people heal and connect with nature, and get the help they need. Because living on the streets, and turning to drugs and alcohol, it's a medical issue. You're letting people suffer from a medical condition on the sidewalk. That's not the place for it. We have tons of empty buildings. Every city in America, every other street is this for lease. Every other building, every other office space for lease, right? Because our economy changed. People work from home. Let's get some leadership that sees that and find some solutions. Get an empty factory, an empty school. Let's convert it. Let's put the money into it. Give people jobs that help care for their fellow humans. Let's use our money on that. And let's have these rallies where we can entertain people. It doesn't have to be cheesy WWE stuff, but there can be music and comedy and things that lift the spirit and make you feel empathy. Because there's a drought of it. As I say, almost every week on this podcast, it wasn't by accident that Reagan came in and cut all the humanities, arts education out of schools. And that guy was an actor, right? It was a guy who made his living as an actor before his racism got the better of him. And he's like, I'd rather be a politician because it's a better way to use the bile inside of me and manipulate people. And people bought it. There's still people out there who think Reagan was some kind of god. He was a doddering, racist old fool who was easily manipulated by the corrupt men around him, But you paint a simple portrait, and Americans love that. They love the iconography that is basically bullshit that has been sent to us most of our lives, And that has reached a fever pitch, as I also say, because all these people on the right, they think they're the good guys. They're like, I got a flag. You don't have a flag on your car. You don't love this country. You want the Mexicans to come here and take it over. No, I don't. But yes, I do want immigration. Yes, I do want Mexican Americans and Mexicans coming here, and anybody who wants to come here and work hard and raise their family and contribute to this place. That's who I want. They're not my enemy. You're my enemy. Ignorance is my enemy. The manipulated mind that you're carrying around thinking somebody else is your problem besides the guy who's feeding you the bullshit, that's my enemy. Darkness is my enemy. Love is my ally. And they know that. That's why they attack LGBTQ families. Trump has a line in his speeches every week now where he goes after transgender folks. And he says the teachers have to stop teaching transgender. Like he thinks it's algebra or something. I don't even think he knows what he's talking about, but he knows it's hateful. And the people cheer. They clap. Just like they clapped for Matt Gaetz when he made that awful remark about abortion. Imagine the climate of clapping that somebody said something so stupid and misogynistic. And that person is basically a fucking child rapist. Maybe that's harsh because they were teenage girls, but you know what I'm saying. Just a scumbag's scumbag. Who, by the way, came to prominence because he would troll people. He would stand in line at grocery stores in Florida and tweet out like, oh, this lady in front of me is like paying with food stamps of an African-American woman, and like posted it. And it got very popular with the racists in Florida. And that's how he started his political ascent, was just pure hatred, privileged white guy. I'm going to be a smarmy little frat boy prick. He went to William and Mary. He grew up rich. He's got a law degree. He's had everything handed to him his whole life. He's only taken and abused. Just like Trump, right? So all these guys, these DeSantises, all these scumbags, they see the formula that works and they're refining it, right? They're increasing the purity of the message. That's why the Nazi flags are coming out, right? That's 2.0. MAGA didn't have that, right? They had the Proud Boys. They had these sort of interlopers that came under the tent of Trump. But now it's straight up Nazis flying flags outside the rally. And DeSantis won't denounce it because he knows he needs them. He knows he needs those right-wing elements to help him achieve power. So he's going to court them as much as he can. And we can't sit on the sidelines and sleep on that. We need to go full bore against that kind of hatred and ignorance. And we need to do it now. Not tomorrow. Not in November. Not next year. We need to come up with a plan now to counter this and save our country from the people that are spilling this stuff. And we'll do that by connecting with our spirit, by reminding us who we really are and what we create in this country. Being out here in LA, I thought of all the benefits I've done out here. I'd fly out and do stuff for Barbara Boxer in the past with Jackson, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. We did the Muse concert at Shoreline probably 10, 12 years ago. It was the No Nukes kind of thing, Redux. Neil Young, I would do the Bridge School benefit, and all these bands would come out and play a concert for his school for kids with special needs. Stephen Stills did an autism benefit every year called Light Up the Blues that I would come out and do. And, Tom Petty, the Heartbreakers would play it. Steve Earle, Brandi Carlile, one of my favorite Brandi Carlile performances. And I got to hang with Brandi, was at that Light Up the Blues thing that we would do at the Pantages Theater, downtown LA. And it was wonderful. It's wonderful to be reminded of our higher nature and our humanity through an artistic event that has no other purpose other than to raise money and awareness. Harry Chapin once told Bruce Springsteen, I do one show for me and one for the other guy, right? Meaning a certain percentage of the concerts I do, there's nothing in it for me. It's all in it for them. And when you're doing stuff like that, it's a higher calling. It just lends a purity to the situation. And it's one of the reasons I worked for Jackson Browne, because he would do so many benefits. That always drew me in. The first concert I ever went to in my life was Jackson Browne, the Eagles, and Linda Ronstadt. And it was a benefit for the governor, in California, whose name is escaping me, who used to date Linda Ronstadt. Jerry Brown. And it was a Jerry Brown benefit. This is the 70s. I was a child. But I remember it, And Brandi Carlile, as I just said, was on that Stephen Stills things. I just saw a clip of her. She played Newport Folk Festival, which it used to be a regular gig of mine. I did it with Graham Nash, and I did it with Jackson, and I did it with my buddy Joel Raphael, who's a folk singer. Really cool event. It's in this old fort in Newport. It's just a beautiful area in July. It's such a nice time of year to be there. And Brandi brought out Joni Mitchell, and Winona Judd, I believe, I saw in the clip singing background vocals and sending her some love. Her loss is staggering, and she was crying through the thing, as was Brandi. And Joni, sing, I've looked at love from both sides now, in a baritone voice. In a lower register, but that same spirit and soul shining through. I'm gonna cry just talking about it. And I saw a 20-second clip. I can't imagine what it would be like being there. Everybody would cry in that audience, and there's no better feeling when the spirit hits you, man. Don't be ashamed of that. Let it flow through you. It's a gift. Alicia Keys, for some reason, always makes me cry. When I would do events with Alicia Keys, she comes out and sings, and the people cheer for her, and there's something in her voice. I don't know what it is. It always makes me choke up, And you carry that with you. That's inspiration. That's touching the flame, as my friend Graham Nash used to say. He met the Everly Brothers, he and Alan Clark, right before they formed the Hollies. They took a bus to Manchester, or they lived in Manchester. They took a bus to another town or into downtown Manchester. They had to travel kind of a little bit. They were 15 years old, and they waited outside the concert, and they met, Don and Phil Everly, and they couldn't believe they were meeting their heroes. And they took that home with them and formed the Hollies. Said, we can do it too. And whenever I traveled with Graham, and I traveled all over the world with that guy, people would come up to him on the street, and they'd love to meet them. And he was always so kind and took so much time. And I remarked once, it's so nice that you do that way, And he was like, look, they're touching the flame. That's what everybody's doing. They just want a little piece of it so they can take it back in their life, and it can inspire what they want to do, And that happened to me, I just remember this mandolin is from Manchester, and I got it. And Graham played it right when I got... my travel instrument, but it just reminded me it's sitting here. It must be why I digressed into that story. But back to Joni, who obviously dated Graham Nash. They lived together in Laurel Canyon, which is just up the hill from where I am now. And, famously, Our House is about Joni. And certainly Joni has some songs about Graham, as I'm sure you guys know. And it's a wonderful thing, and they're friends. And Joni, had a stroke a few years ago, and I was working for CSN when that happened. And they thought, it was done. They basically went to say goodbye. They visited her in the hotel or in the hospital. I was with Graham, when he told Crosby, about seeing her, and she wasn't looking good. Not in a negative way, just like they were very concerned about her. It was a very serious thing. And now she's back. She was singing, at Newport, honored as the sort of queen she is and what she represents for so many people. And it's just a beautiful thing. seeing one generation honor another that inspired him. And Brandi Carlile is, is a legend. Stills turned me on to her before she became the big, sort of national Grammy-winning act she is, and she was always that good. It's not like she turned into how great she was. She was great outside of the box, or right out the box, and anybody who's seen her knows that. I mean, live, she's as epic as Pearl Jam, and that's no joke. I mean, that girl rocks. I bought my baby Collings because of her, and told her that backstage at the concert. I said, I have small hands, and I bought the baby Collings because it works really well for me. And I remember her taking a moment when I said that, she was surprised that I would admit I had small hands, or would say something sort of vulnerable and sensitive in that way, And by the way, God didn't make me all small, it's just the hands. But so cheesy. But my point was, she wasn't expecting me. Guys used to be kind of masculine about guitars and stuff and whatever. She's a wonderful musician, wonderful spirit, and she brought Joni out, and what a treat. And I hope that clip goes viral, and I hope you see it. But to the larger point, we need that. We need a Newport Folk Festival for the Democrats. We need to come together, because when you come together, you also realize, hey, I can do more than this. I know what I can do in my hometown. And then you meet somebody else who's like, I'd like to help with that. And I know this other guy who we can probably get involved. And you network, and it builds, and it becomes a movement. And that's what we need now to counter this stuff. We need a movement to combat climate change. We need everybody seeing they have a role in this. No matter how small you think the action is, it's going to make a difference. And it's really only that way that we're going to be able to do something about it, because only in that way will we be able to put enough pressure and show the leaders that it's viable to go in this direction, that we want to go in the direction of conservation, of saving this planet, of providing equality and safety for all people, no matter your race, color, creed, sexuality. If you've been here 2 weeks, you deserve rights, you deserve safety. Come on in. Get your kids signed up in a safe school where they can go without being attacked, by some madman with a gun that the NRA is basically promoting, because they're evil. They're just evil and bereft, and they know that their product appeals to the same fascist mindset that the GOP appeals to, right? So we need a ground up movement to counter all this stuff. And we're going to do it, right? We're going to do it. We all feel alone. We all feel isolated. We all feel overwhelmed. But when you come together, you realize you're not alone. You realize that the Spirit will move you. You know what I'm saying? God is always providing whatever God is to you, your higher power. I'm saying it in terms of recovery. I'm not saying it in terms of religion, but we all know when you're connected. We all know when you see those coincidences that aren't coincidences. And we all know how that feels. And the basic message that comes through that, from me, is serve somebody else. This isn't about you, Noel. This is about doing your job to help somebody else out. It's not about glory, right? It felt glorious last night to have a great set. I probably had the best set of my life, on that stage last night, because I was intimidated. Dana Carvey was the first comedian up. It was Jeff Ross, Adam Schiff, Dana Carvey. Margaret Cho came out and killed, right? Just walked in with her dog off the street, handed her dog to the sound guy, went up on stage, killed for 10 minutes. Hilarious, right? Then Jenna Friedman, brilliant set, talking about abortion issues. Real, the kind of comedy I like. Real brave, smart stuff. It was hard for the audience. It wasn't 100% what the audience was expecting, because it was challenging, and that's what the best, comedy does. It makes you think. So then I'm next. Jeff Ross, I've met him a few times. I worked on some of those roasts, but he doesn't know who I am as a comedian. I had to prove myself last night, and I did. But my point is, and it felt good, but I wasn't doing it for my ego. Do you know what I mean? When I meditate before these shows, and when I clear out, it's about how can I carry the message? How can I say what I want to say? That's what I focus on, as Jimmy would always say, lead with love. Jimmy, who was the, engineer, co-host, producer, whatever you want to call him, my sidekick on here for years, wonderful dude, or for a year, wonderful guy, texted me some encouragement and said, lead with love, and you'll be okay. Those are true words, I was like, he's right. It's not about me. It's about you. And when you realize that, then you're truly free. Then you're truly happy. Then you can truly do things that you didn't think you could do otherwise, right? Because you let go of the results. It becomes about the process and the purity and the spirit. And people connect to that. Lots of people came up to me last night and enjoyed the set a lot, and it wasn't like, oh, which joke did you like or whatever. Sometimes you wonder how stuff went, but like it was more about the spirit. They're like, I got your message. You made me cry at the end. You made me pee my pants. That's what I want. I want to make you feel something. That's how you really communicate. You let people remember how you make them feel. That's not original to me. That's a sort of famous quote that somebody said, That's what people remember about a performance. You remember how that guy made you feel. When you go see Springsteen, you're like, oh, that E chord, the beginning of Born to Run, through the Marshall, through the Telecaster. No. You think, how did I feel when he sang that and I pumped my fist in the air and there was 30,000 other people feeling free for a moment, expressing the frustration of their lives, knowing they weren't alone, knowing there was music and art that was going to empower them and make their burden a little lighter. That's inspiration. That's what we do it for. Anyway, that's probably enough of a podcast for today. I'm going to be in Cape Cod on August 3rd, which is a week from this Wednesday. So come on out. It's going to be warm. You can tell I got a lot to say. I got a lot of laughter. I got a lot of love for you guys. I can't wait to see you. It's going to be a lot of fun. So please come out August 3rd, Music Room, Cape Cod. My buddy Ethan is joining me. Real smart guy. Went to Harvard. Funny dude. Did a lot of shows with him in New York. So I'm looking forward to seeing him again. I think you'll enjoy him. And it's going to be a good night. So August 3rd, Cape Cod, Music Room. Thank you for listening. You can always find me at noelcasler.com or on Twitter. I'll keep the tweets coming. I've been traveling a lot. I'll be back in New York this week. And once again, thanks for listening. I appreciate all of you guys. I love you guys. Stay safe. Love always wins. Until next week, peace.